Today's noisy digital-first world is a challenging one for business owners. How do you get more people to know you, trust you, and to respect your brand? How do you stay front of mind with your target audience, as well as talked about in a positive way in the marketplace? The answer is public relations, but not as you know it. Get ready to unlock the potential of your business through the power of PR, content, and digital communications. Get ready to become your own PR machine.
G'day, my name is Trevor Young, and thank you for joining us here on the Become Your Own PR Machine podcast. Today, we're going to be looking at all about sub-channels and pre-owned media, a new way to think about your journey up the content creation ladder. And as we know, creating content is a massive part of the PR remit today. If you want to become your own PR machine, then content is going to have to figure quite heavily, in fact, very heavily, in owned media sense, obviously in a social media sense. And of course, that drip feeds into earned media. But today is going to be more around owned media, or as I alluded to at the top of the show, pre-owned media. So let's get into it. Now, over the years, if you've listened to me at any point in time on any of my podcasts or interviews or anything that I've done, you'll know that I really have become a champion for business owners building out their owned media network. And this is so they can grow their audience and in turn, lessening their reliance on having to pay for advertising or rely on the social media algorithms to treat them fairly, which we know is not going to happen. So my starting point is developing an owned media property. And for example, this is an email newsletter, a podcast, a blog, a video show, which is, published to YouTube, but also housed on your own website or blog, or a regular live stream or digital magazine. So, when we say owned media, it does cover quite a few different modalities. But drilling a little bit deeper, how can we turn that owned media property into and I'm using air quotes here, destination show? In other words, building a sub-brand that over time becomes a backdoor into your world, into your brand. So think daily, weekly, fortnightly, monthly appointment viewing, reading, or listening. For example, a podcast. A great example of this is Win the Content Game. It's a podcast produced by Capshow. Another example is a YouTube show. Check out the Goulet Pencast, the Goulet Pencast by Goulet Pens. Might be a live stream show. Michelle J. Raymond does this on LinkedIn. She does the social media for B2B growth video live stream. A newsletter. One newsletter that I really like reading is The Ask by Ellen Donnelly. And it could be an example blog or, like a blog today is really like a flagship online publication in this instance, where it's treated like a magazine. Someone who I think does it really well is a company called Bed Threads, and they have their Bed Threads journal. If you get a chance to check that one out, please do. And so I guess if you're smart about it, you can mix and match a number of different modalities as I've just walked through those examples that I've just given. For example, how might this work? Well, you record a live stream, video live stream. You could repurpose that for a podcast and just by stripping out the audio. You could publish the finished live streamed video on YouTube. You could turn the recording into a blog post and using an AI tool such as Cast Magic. It's a really good tool to help you transcribe the recording and pull out the insights and informational nuggets. And of course, you can also use that content to put together an email newsletter to send out to your list of subscribers. And of course, your blog can always be reimagined as a newsletter and vice versa. So lots of interchange and repurposing and reimagining of this content if you're smart about creating your long form content and creating a destination show or appointment reading, i.e. a newsletter. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I do get excited about the opportunities available to business owners to get a leg up on their competition by being smart in how they use PR, content, and digital communications. Creating a regular audio or video show or editorial publication, I think, is a really savvy way to start getting attention and gaining people's attention for all the right reasons, as well as build an audience for your ideas, your insights, your expertise, and your knowledge. Now, this is fine for motivated entrepreneurs who have been experimenting with content and social media over the years. They've been in the trenches a little bit. But sometimes I need to pull back. I need to pull back on the reins a bit and encourage those business owners who have been sitting on the sidelines for a while. Maybe they've been waiting for some extra clarity as to why they should burst forth with enthusiasm around this whole content creation thing. So that's on me. So that's what this episode is all about. I'm going to now bring in a term that I mentioned at the top of the episode, pre-owned media. So this is an idea that I think will sit perfectly with this latter group of people who have, business owners, entrepreneurs. You might be a personal brand and running a personal brand-based business, or everyone's got a personal brand, of course. But, you are the business and it's a solopreneur or a one-person show, and you are the brand and the business. Maybe you've been pulling back, maybe have been sitting on the sidelines and haven't really been going too far into the content trenches to create long-form content. Again, doesn't matter which modality. So this idea that I'm about to unpack for you is great for that group of business owners. And you're someone who doesn't want to tackle anything too onerous straight away. Maybe the idea of tackling something onerous or big or, a destination show is what's kept you away from creating content for an audience. But you still want to start small. You still want to get out there, but you want to make it, a little bit more manageable. So what's a small content project that you can start with? Now, I'm calling this whole arena, this whole concept, pre-owned media, because it's what happens before we start creating an owned media property, or a sub-branded owned media property, as I often will call it. The whole notion of pre-owned media, what we do before we create a destination show, this is a smaller scale content activity or activities, if you want to go a little bit bigger, that you can focus on before tackling a bigger project. Now, this concept was an absolute aha moment that genuinely slapped me in the face while I was chatting with Andreas Lopez Varela. Now that, if you're a keen listener of this podcast, you will know that was in episode 14, the one before this one, where I did interview Andreas and we really got into a deep and meaty conversation around owned media. Now, Andreas is, I believe, a genuine thought leader in the world of content and PR and digital marketing. When it comes to content creation, Andreas is a believer in not taking on too much straight up for fear of flaming out due to the responsibility of producing these weekly podcasts or newsletters or fortnightly YouTube show. He's very aware of this, and this came up in my conversation with him in the last episode. Andreas says it's better to work up to the commitment of producing your first destination show or flagship editorial publication if you're going to go into text, no matter what the modality you choose to go with. And this is, again, I think this is a fair call. In our chat, Andreas suggested business owners who are keen to produce an owned media property should perhaps start off smaller and test their content hook, theme, or idea, which, as we know, when we're going to create a show, we need a theme, something to hang our content hat on. And he talks about the concept of channel within a channel. Now, I will say here that Andreas credits Edwin Smith from The Social Sandwich with coining this idea about a channel within a channel. And I love the concept. I think it's very simple and powerful. But let's get into, what does that mean? What is a channel within a channel? This is how the conversation panned out. If you heard last week, this is a bit of a prompter, a reminder of what I took out of my conversation with Andreas. Do you think people should have just one other, so one owned media channel and one social channel?
I think it's not as simple as that, because I think the nature of these channels has changed so much that you kind of have channels within channels. Instagram is a great example. You know, it's the nature and the purpose of Instagram has changed so much, even over the past since the pandemic, right? You know, like it used to be all about Instagram TV, and it was about long form viewing there. That died a ignominious and probably necessary death. But from that rose this format that was influenced by TikTok, you know, Reels.
Yep.
And then also the addition of broadcast channels, in particular in Instagram, is a great example of how you have these channels within channels. So there's a guy I know and who I think is, you know, one of the you know, he's a super credible, very knowledgeable guy. His name is Edwin Smith, and he is one of the best, I think, you know, organic social people in Australia. He's got a lot of very good and very accurate hot takes on organic social media primarily. He's really sort of like honed in on how to make that work for your audience and your brand. And one of the things that Edwin says, which really provoked a big thought in me, was about, you know, thinking of those formats within channels or channels within channels, right? And what do you do on Instagram on your feed? What do you do on Instagram in your stories? What do you do for Reels? What do you do for messages? What do you do for the broadcast channel, right? And so using those different features and go, maybe my audience is just about stories. So maybe you dump a few things in the feed, but actually really you're focusing on the stories. Maybe the broadcast channel is perfect for your audience and the kind of content you have, because it's a little bit deeper engagement, but it's still one way. So it's kind of brand safe as well. You know, people aren't sort of, you know, knocking you. Maybe they're giving you a double tap with a thumbs down at the most, right? So I think that when it comes to choosing that, and, you know, I will give full credit to Edwin on this point, it's maybe thinking about those different options within there. LinkedIn's another great example, right? You've got the LinkedIn, you've got the feed, you've got the newsletter, articles less and less so, you know, but, and, you know, audio events, groups in LinkedIn, you know, so there are those different areas. So I think it's important not just to think of social media as feeds. And so therefore some of those spaces, I think, and this may certainly rattle the cage, TY, but some of those spaces I think become quasi-owned spaces.
Now, the idea of a channel within a channel, or a sub-channel, as it were, is acknowledgement that the game has changed with social media, and that many of the platforms today have in fact become a collection of channels rather than being wholly and solely the channel. Hope that makes sense. Just to reiterate, Instagram has Reels. It has stories, it has broadcasts, it has live streams, as well as the main image-based feed. If you look at LinkedIn, LinkedIn has the main feed, obviously, for posts, but it also has newsletters and audio events and live streams, and you can create groups on there as well. So this channel within a channel concept was a real eye-opener, and it was pretty obvious when you think about it, but when you roll it out, and Andreas was explaining it, this was a real eye-opener for me. So in other words, what Andreas was saying is, why not just focus on Instagram stories instead of all the other sub-channels within the overall Insta channel? I think when we say we're on Instagram, but we do Reels and we might do some stories and we might do some images for the feed and carousels and all sorts of things, why not, Andreas is challenging us, just focus on stories or just focus on Reels? Why not zero in on LinkedIn live streams for the bulk of your content without worrying too much about all the other many bells and whistles on the platform? And it's just a complete reframing of how you can approach social media. I think what really hit home is Andreas said, don't think about social media as just a feed. Again, reframing what social media is all about today. It makes perfect sense. But I will caution here, okay? I think this whole pre-owned media, channels within a channel idea or direction is a good one and does make perfect sense. But I think only if you're at the beginning of your journey or you're going back to the well in terms of starting over with your content creation efforts. I'm not sure if you want to make a huge impact that one channel is going to cut it, but it is a terrific starting point. So the two things you need to think about if you're starting out and you're serious about making a dent with your content. The first one is, before going full on into creating an owned media property and, as Andreas suggests, potentially flaming out due to the responsibility of doing that, maybe you consider this pre-owned strategy. The things you do before committing to that podcast, that newsletter, that live stream or YouTube show. And the second thing to think about is start thinking about channels within a channel. Which platform reaches your audience and what channels or sub-channels exist within the platform that you can leverage to build an audience, test an idea, get people excited about your content. Now, I will say these two concepts are intertwined. Pre-owned media is the strategy, and channel within a channel, which one are you going to choose, is the tactic. And also, please note, I'm not talking about becoming an independent content creator who's creating a mini media company and then launching a business off the back of it, but rather I'm talking about the business owner, the very busy business owner who is building out their own media network to support their enterprise and commercial goals. So let me know on Twitter. I'm at Trevor Young. Hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm easy to find there. If we're not connected, please connect with me. Send me a DM. Let's talk. I'd really be interested to hear what you think about this idea of being laser focused on one social media sub-channel before committing to building out a more robust primary owned media channel. And I'll just reiterate once again, this is a starting point to move into, to test your ideas, to refine some of your content, to really start getting some hooks and angles and seeing whether your ideas and your content theme is landing with an audience. Do it through this sub-channel pre-owned strategy using a sub-channel of Instagram, for example, or Twitter or LinkedIn or wherever. And then once you're really happy and that's really working a treat, that's when you can maybe burst forth with enthusiasm, as I like to say, and create that podcast or create that video live show or create that, YouTube show or your newsletter or online editorial magazine or a digital only. I see there's mobile only magazines that you can now create as well. So great opportunities for someone for now that, if you've been sitting on the fence, you haven't got an excuse to stay sitting on the sidelines. Get into the main game, get your feet wet, start and build up to your owned media property. Until next time, my name is Trevor Young, and this is the Become Your Own PR Machine podcast.